I think we'll call this meeting to order. Apologies for being a little bit late, but there's lots of great conversation going on. Welcome to our committee of the whole and board meeting today for November the 29th, I think. It's hard to believe. And it's a pleasure to have all of you around the table. I know Trustee Kaiser sent his regrets, but it's so nice to have Trustee Primo with us in person, and of course, returning Trustee Dobson and Trustee Doherty. So it's great to have you guys here. And it's nice to have the rest of you too. I'm just excited about new faces. So thank you for that. I would like to begin before I pass it over to Vice Chair Boland with the territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which our school and district buildings are situated is the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on the land on which we gather today. As I mentioned, Trustee Kaiser sends his regrets today. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Boland to manage our committee of the whole.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So everybody has the agenda. So the first thing is that we'll go into our closed session. Do I need a mover and a seconder for that, please? Mike, thank you. Brian, thank you. All in favor? So the audit committee met on Wednesday, November 23rd to discuss the following items. So we have 2022-23 regional internal audit update. The 22-23 internal audit charter. Draft audited financial statements for the year ended August 31st. And annual reports to the board from the audit committee. Do you have anything to add for this, Jen?
No, but I'm just having a little wondering, and I think we do this every year, that the accumulated surplus appropriation transfers. Oh, no, that's in the committee of the whole. Okay. All good, Leo.
I think that comes later.
This is audit committee open, yeah.
Okay.
No.
So the following recommendations were made from that committee. So 2022-23 regional internal audit update that the Renfrew County District School Board Audit Committee receives for information the November 23rd, 2022 REAT update. Number 2, 2022-23 internal audit charter that the Renfrew County District School Board Audit Committee approved the 2022-23 regional internal audit team charter. Number 3, the draft audited financial statements for the year ending August 31st, 2022, that the Renfrew County District School Board adopt the draft 2021-22 financial statements as audited and reported upon by Welch LLP at their November 29th, 22 board meeting, subject to the board approval of the internal restricted accumulated surplus transfers. And number 4, annual reports to the board from the audit committee, that the audit committee approved the annual report to the board of trustees for the year ended August 31st, 2022, and the annual report to the board of trustees and forwarded to the Ministry of Education for the year ended August 31st, 2022, and that both reports be adopted by the Renfrew County District School Board at the November 29th, 2022 board meeting. Any questions on that convoluted agenda?
I haven't caught up yet.
Okay,
Sorry. No, that's fine.
got it?
I do.
You have no highlights next to it?
No,
Okay, that's good.
I do not. Here is my.
Here's mine. So I need a mover and a seconder for that report. Thank you, Mike, and a seconder. Thank you, Kim. All in favor? Thank you. That's passed. So this is what you were talking about then, Jenny, the accumulated
Yeah.
surplus appropriation transfer?
Yes.
Right.
So this is what Tammy Sylvester was referring to when she was talking about that accumulated surplus. And so the transfer of the 1.1 million from internally appropriated for retirement gratuities is something that we have restricted internally, saved for to offset that ministry requirement, but it doesn't affect cash. It's just a matching revenue versus expenses, right? As people retire, we pay out. So this is just a balancing, a smoothing as required by the ministry. Our next transfer of that 301, which is the Keys rent that Tammy referred to, that we pop into that renewal non-instructional appropriated funds, that is cash. That's cash for future use that as a board of trustees, you've decided that you're going to put into this internally restricted fund so that in the future, if we were required to do something, for example, to maintain one of the admin buildings, we would have some money to do so. So these are then the transfers that were included in that second last recommendation that Leo had just read out.
Okay, that's it. That's your report. All right, so attached to this is a recommendation. And I'll read that out to you. That the Renfrew County District School Board approves the internal appropriation in the 2021-2022 year as follows. Accumulated surplus internally appropriated. 1, transfer of $1,151,457 from internally appropriated for retirement gratuities to fund the current year amortization of the future benefit for retirement gratuities. Number 2, transfer of $301,000 into renewal non-instructional appropriated funds internally restricted for administration projects. So I move the adoption of this. I just need a seconder. Thank you, Susan. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Thank you, that's passed.
I texted Bill, but let me just trade in these two friends for another one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a huge thanks to Tammy for their work and their steady hand of guidance, both in auditing and our finance work. We couldn't do it without you, quite literally. So thank you both for all that you've done for us. Thank you.
Tammy.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Very nice. Thanks.
Thanks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
They're spelled slightly differently, right?
Other stuff.
Really interesting. And this. Yeah, we get to. We have a few minutes to stretch our legs till Bill comes. Is that the idea?
That's the idea.
That's good.
So we're just waiting for Bill to come.
I can get started while we wait for Bill to appear. That's it. Oh, yeah. So more money, talk, but this is a little bit different. Bill was supposed to be around, so I'm just wondering if something pulled him away. And if it did, it was an emergency, so we can just go ahead. So as we do every year, capital funding is separate from the operating funding that Tammy was just going over in the financial statements, although they are included in there. We have two different types of funding: school renewal, which funds for those pupil accommodations, Leo, that you were talking to, heating, lighting, cleaning, maintenance, school facility renewal. The budgeted amount for us this year is 2.8 million. School condition improvement funding is to support the sort of the renewal needs. We're getting about 6.5 this year, which is up just about 700,000. And this is for our schools or school sites that were built prior to 2010. And again, 70% of that has to be used for major building components. So foundation, roofs, windows, heating and ventilation. And the remaining 30 can be spent on locally identified priorities, equipment, interior finishes, site works, and interior lighting. A lot of our work that we've done, if you look up in this room, for example, the lighting, the LED lighting, it improves the spaces for student learning, but also saves us a great deal of money for utilities. So we try to pick and choose types of work like that. Some of our buildings were built in the 1800s. Some of them are multiple additions. And so things like HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and that sort of thing consumes a lot of our money just to keep our sites going. Temporary accommodation, we are currently receiving funding for about 68,000, which probably lines exactly up with our lease expense at Whitney Public School, where we have a shared space. So that's nice to have that funded. Hey, Bill,
Hi,
we're on page 2, major capital funding.
can I disappear for about 4 more minutes?
Let me keep rolling and then you can talk about
Sure.
this. That way you can just breathe. Yep, so the major capital funding. So July 2020, the ministry announced that $2.7 million for the addition of the childcare center at Herman Street. We are expecting about another $100,000 to be incurred this year. Construction is so close to complete and we're almost at occupancy. It's getting really exciting, and I'm happy to say that I think we are 4 to 6 months behind schedule and couple $100,000 over budget for any year. And this construction capital project this size is amazing, but coming through COVID with the labor supply and the supply chain, I think is really quite remarkable. So, and it's a really nice space. So Bill, why don't you talk about the current status in the projects?
Okay, so I'm proposing a slate of projects and a sum of money that at this time, given what I know, I feel is enough money to fund those projects. But on that list of approximately 100 projects, there are quite a number of that have been there for several years, and there are projects that we haven't anticipated yet that will come up, that we will respond to out of the money that we have allocated. So really what we're looking for is approval to spend up to the amount that I've quoted. If for some reason, if things go swimmingly and we get more projects done than is probably humanly possible, we would have to come back to you for approval to spend more than this. I had hoped to bring a smaller number to the board this year because we just given the past 3 years and the stress and the demands, we were trying to make a manageable list where we would actually get more of the projects done. But I struggled with that because there are a number of projects that are very important for the classroom, for the infrastructure. So I'm still putting a big number forward. We do anywhere between $7 and $12 million worth of projects. I think that's sort of what our scope is over the past 6 or 7 years. So I'm right in that wheelhouse, but as you know, when I come back at some point in the spring, there'll be projects that we haven't been able to tackle. And part of it is the availability of contractors to do the work. Even, we've got a number of tendered projects that we've got contractors lined up going back as far as 2021, where they haven't been able to get to the work for whatever reason. So, I hope that you will be kind when I come back to you. And if there are projects that are of particular interest, we always try and get the highest priority ones first. But we're proposing the 3.7 million facilities renewal. That's money that actually comes into our coffers and we have in our hands. We want to make sure that that gets spent. The SCI funding, we're proposing to spend a little more than what the ministry is allocating for us, but those funds flow with the project. So we actually have to do the work to get that money. So it's important that we try and spend down that school condition index funding, because we don't want a surplus sitting there, because then the ministry will be asking us why you need that much money if you can't spend it. The temporary accommodation funding, that's our rent for Whitney, so that it's a little bit more than we're allocated this year, but again, it's capital funding that we can use for this basically operational expense. We want to do that. The major capital is the cleaning up of the last bits and pieces at Herman Street, vehicles and equipment. So we're able to capitalize any of the facilities, trucks and vans that are on the road, as well as custodial equipment that's more than $5,000. So that's the $10,860,400 that I bring to you today, along with a couple pages of capital priorities projects. I can talk a little bit about how this list gets formulated. We do have a process where we go out to the administrators at the schools and ask them what their priorities are. We provide definitions about, what fits into the capital funding model from the ministry. So we take that information, we take information from exec council, from our trades who are looking at the equipment. We also look at the ministry audits of our buildings that are done on a 5-year basis to see what in their estimation is equipment that's end of life. And then we distill the $100 million worth of needs that we have. And I'm really not being facetious. We have probably $100 million worth of capital work. Our buildings, the average age for our buildings now is in excess of 60 years. And, those are, when we look at things, we've got LED lights in almost all of our buildings, but the infrastructure behind those lights, the wiring, the plumbing is all anywhere from, 50 to 100 years old. That's the piece that's difficult to capture, because those jobs, they're not summer jobs. So they keep on getting bumped back, and we have a great big box of Band-Aids that we use to try and patch and hold things together. But at some point, and for example, at our high school in the tech wing, there's something about the water chemistry and the plumbing piping, the copper piping that was installed in the 50s there, that it's eating away at those pipes. So we've done, a dozen fair-sized capital projects to replace either the domestic plumbing piping or the hot water plumbing for the RADs. So all that to say, we try and make sure that every site gets some attention. One of the I'm very lucky that I've been afforded a fairly large crew of staff to do projects for a board our size. We undertake as many projects and all that maintenance work that happens to keep things running, the repairs to toilets and lights and floors, all that. We try and do as much as we possibly can ourselves, because it costs about 50% of what it would be to bring in contractors. So that's the trade-off, is we have to have more vehicles and tools and payroll and HR to support those people, but we also get huge value by keeping as much work as we can in-house. We try and touch every building. We've got a crew of 4 painters, which has made an incredible difference. When 6 or 7 years ago, we had 2 painters, and I think I'd done the calculation based on what 2 painters could do. we would, if you did it chronologically throughout the county, it would be about 100 years before a space was repainted. Which was okay when the walls were finished with the splattered shellac that you couldn't damage with a hammer. It's probably a good thing we can't use that anymore because the fumes, VOCs coming off paint like that is just horrendous. But the trade-off is the materials that we use today are not nearly as durable. They're much safer to use, better for the environment, but they don't stand up to the abuse of an active school. So we're seeing areas that have to be repainted in 5 or 6 years based on the damage of use. But we have staff to do it, and they're working days and evenings and driving throughout the county. So when you put in a new ceiling, LED lights, and paint the halls, you've got a new school, and it just feels so fresh and bright. So that's one of the important things we do. And some of you have heard me talk a lot about the importance of the environment. When we look at the staff in front of the students are the most important piece. The school culture is important. The family home life is important for how students succeed, but the environment is also important. We know that there's an impact of somewhere around 18% on, if we can provide that ideal environment, those students will do better. And that's everything from lighting, natural views, the HVAC system. So those are all the pieces. So we try to control as much of the pieces that we can control. So I'm not going to go through the 100 projects or approximately 100 projects. And I know there's a couple that since I did the list, there's a couple more that I want to add to it. But I'm available for any questions that you might have about how we come up with this plan or where we dedicate our efforts.
So because you have 99, we're not to infer you are a Wayne Gretzky fan?
No,
No.
it wouldn't be Gretzky. It'd be someone from Montreal. That'd be
That's right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Number 87, I bet you're expecting this one. Are there other schools that have vape detectors installed?
We started the pilot at Valor School installing it's an environmental sensor that will pick up vaping, similar to a smoke detector in a fire alarm system. So we have one washroom where this has been installed at Valor. We do have 3 more sensors to install as sometime probably between now and Christmas. So to answer your question, it's only at Valor. I've got 2 other schools that are clamoring for vape sensors to try and address the issue of vaping in schools.
Certainly needed there, and I can see it spreading, I'm sure. Another question, if I may, number 86. Now, I know this has been on the books for a while. Any particular reason? Is it a supply issue?
So the installer, the company who built the gym divider, we haven't had much luck because they would be the obvious firm to use to address the issue. What we have to do is actually lift the central divider about 2.5 inches. It requires all the sections of the divider to be taken down and a new assembly attached to the top of the panels. And there are only a couple companies that do this work, and the availability to do it's not like installing a new gym divider. So that everyone's, they've expressed some interest, but to actually get the work quoted and done hasn't been possible over the past 2 years. So we'll try again.
Follow up if I may, on that big divider in the quad gym. What was the initial problem? Was it just the divider the vertical was just too high for the gym, or did the gym sag a bit after construction?
We only have an issue when there's significant snow load. So that added weight, or if you've got 6 or 8 inches of ice on the roof, you get enough enough sag in the middle of the, because it's a huge span across the quad gym. Get enough sag so that the panels will drag on the floor and get to the point where the mechanical opener will fail. So we need to get those partitions lifted just a couple inches, but it's, yeah, it ends up being a big job.
Well, this is Canada, and, you know, you expect a fair snow load, especially on a huge stuff like that. Is that a design flaw or?
We went through this after the first winter. We went through the structural drawings. We had them validated by a third-party structural engineer. They felt that the design was sufficient. It met all existing codes and should have worked, but it didn't.
On luck.
On luck.
I've already mentioned that name. That's for the people, that's the construction company that we hope you appreciate.
Any other questions?
I just know the fellows had a similar issue years ago. I don't know if it was ever rectified or not, but I just don't know if they open them up and close them up when it's in the middle of the winter when there's heavy snow load on, but I know that they had the same issue years ago. I don't know if it was ever dealt with.
I think we ended up replacing the divider about 12 years ago at Fellows.
Yeah.
And that solved the issue.
Yeah.
And we had similar issues at Mackenzie as well, and
Yeah.
required a new divider there.
Not a structural engineer, but I mean, if they're gonna replace the divider, if they make the divider an inch shorter, maybe when it does sag a little bit, we got an inch to play with. I'm just being sarcastic, but okay.
If we build a new school, I'll make sure that the divider is free swinging.
You got my vote, Bill.
Yeah.
Not my money, but my vote.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, Susan and then Jody.
Just a couple of questions, Bill. The Herman Street childcare, did we get any additional funding from the ministry because of the increase of costs that were incurred since we started it?
No, we did, before we started construction, we did make a case, and I think we received about 500,000.
Yeah.
But that quickly disappeared through supply chain issues and all the increased COVID costs that we faced on that project.
Have we gone back to the ministry to ask for more though?
We raised the issue and we've been put off to basically, they want to wait till the project's done and they'll do an analysis of where we're at.
I'm just asking because I understand that some other projects that haven't begun yet have had their budgets increased because of the cost. So just thinking we probably need to make sure.
There are some costs that I'm hoping, there's about $160,000 in site costs that weren't anticipated in the original tender, that the ministry will sometimes support for it. So I'm hopeful we might get a chunk of that, but the problem is it's not over by if your $14 million project is over by 40%, the ministry's interested. If it's over by a couple $100,000, they expect you to just eat it.
Okay, fair enough, but I still need to ask, right? So,
Right.
yeah, good point. Question around vehicles, and you mentioned vehicles and equipment. Are we looking at electric vehicles at all when you're purchasing?
I'm
Oh, it's tricky.
looking at them.
Are you looking at them and doing, considering them, I guess is a better question.
We're not quite there yet. I would love to start to electrify our fleet of vehicles. I don't think this is the year. Next year, when we replace the courier van, that will be an obvious choice for an electric vehicle. A couple of the smaller vans, the small service vans that we use for our HVAC tech, they would be a good choice. The full size, the 3/4 ton pickups, that one's going to be tough because I'd be able to buy 1.5 trucks, hopefully. So it's that trade-off. I would honestly, no one wants to electrify that fleet more than I do. It's that trade-off between the costs we need to think about the long-term costs of continuing to burn carbon plus or versus that upfront capital cost, and then ensuring we have infrastructure to keep vehicles moving.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other piece. And I know that the district is so large that often there are long, long trips. They're not just, from one end of the city of Pembroke to the other. They're much longer. So
One of the concerns is the battery life when you're towing as well, because a lot of our, we spend a lot of time towing trailers that either have equipment or the workshop is on the trailer for when the trades show up at the school. And that's going to be a factor too. If we start getting down to, a 300-kilometer battery life, then that could be tough.
there, if I may, just to follow up, I'm wondering, and I'm sure you're keeping an eye on it too, if there might be some grant opportunities from the federal government down the road
Yes,
around that.
there's a group of that I belong to that we're constantly trying to see where we can leverage federal support. And on that, you may remember that we had submitted a grant application to decarbon AJ Charbonneau and Opiongo. The ministry was to provide feedback on that in November. I just got an email yesterday that they're behind. They're still considering our application. That would be, that for me, that would be a legacy project to take a 50-year-old high school and make it carbon neutral would just be incredible. And I'm hopeful that we'll get a couple $1 million from the federal government to help us make that happen.
Fingers crossed, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I guess just one other question, I'm just around accessibility. I know you're still doing a number of accessibility items to various schools. And is the deadline supposedly by 2022? Is that when we're supposed to be fully accessible or?
25.
Oh, sorry, 2025, that's what I
There's no
meant.
enforcement mechanism.
Okay,
And there's also, it's not the way the regulation is written, it's a grandfathered, so you don't actually have to bring buildings up. It's done more through public pressure, and the Human Rights Commission is that's what forces the issue is with, we've got staff or students and inaccessible buildings. So, I don't want to be in the paper or something like that.
no, for sure. And we obviously want to get our staff and students.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're moving along quite
Yes.
nicely then generally across the county. across the
Well,
district.
Nothing ever happens as quickly as I'd like, but we are pushing forward with it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Jody?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question also follows up on the accessibility issue. Looking at these priorities, they seem to be organized just by alphabetically, but some of the work specifically around accessibility jumps out to me as being very important. As we've heard, getting kids to school and making sure that they are safe and inclusive and that we follow our strategic plan. So to what extent does a project having an accessibility category move it up on the list in terms of priority? Like, are we doing getting the front entrance handicap accessible? Is that more important than, for example, like a vape sensor?
It is. Yeah. Yes, it is. The issue is I can send a general maintenance staff with a roll of Cat6 cable to wire the vape sensor, whereas I have to hire a consultant to do the front entrance. Which involves an architect, electrical engineering, the structural engineering, and then take that into tender. So that's, my hierarchy of needs when it comes to work at the schools is that the special education department has the highest priority. When they call, we drop everything. Unless there's an immediate hazard to life. So health and safety has that same emphasis, and then IT, and then then program needs, and then everything else comes after that.
Anybody else? I have a few, Bill. So I just noticed, number 12, Champlain, yeah, you're paving swales and hills. I'm just trying to vision,
Yes, so on the west side of the property, on the hill running down alongside the building, there's a lot of runoff and erosion, so we're going to pave where the erosion's happening. So that swale is just like a little valley to direct the water so that it's not eating into the but
good for skateboarding too, then, are you gonna?
my skateboarding days are done. What happens when school is out will be up to the local residents.
Very good. And then for number 34, Pine View, just general, small renovation, so just relocating the continuing education to Pine View, I'm assuming that's just a cost saving, so we won't have to pay rent and.
Yep, that's, it was finishing off, there was a decision made a few years ago to move the continuing education sites into our existing buildings and not to have the lease or rental payments, and this was just that final site getting tucked into one of our buildings.
Right. And I guess we already talked about just doing stuff for Opiongo. So here, like number 80, it says feasibility study for PV solar ground source heat pumps. So I'm just curious about the criteria for looking at buildings, whether to assess them for solar panels, heat pumps, just why isn't, if it's more feasible, why isn't all of our buildings like heat pump, like say for this one, what would stop, our building here from having like solar panels, heat pumps or other buildings?
So the reason that Opiongo was identified as the size of the property, it's 54 acres. It's relatively new roofing on the majority of the building, so that roof mount solar PV would be appropriate. Those were the two biggest factors about that. And again, we will be decarbonating all our buildings over the next 10 to 12 years, maybe sooner, just for all the reasons, the good reasons about reducing our carbon footprint and reducing our carbon tax footprint as well. So I guess the Opiongo, that project has sort of morphed into that federal grant application, which would help support those upgrades at Opiongo. And really the only reason we're not doing it at every site right now is because it's a, I don't know, $100 million hit to tackle that. And the person, we don't have the human resources capital to undertake that.
And my last one was just talk about 94, all buildings just enhance built environment to support Indigenous education. So just where are we with that? How are we doing with that?
We have a meeting scheduled for the 16th to talk about next steps on that project. So this is the year where you will see some the project will bear fruit.
Very good. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Anybody else?
I guess I'd just like to thank Phil for pulling this all together and bringing it to you at this table at this time, and for you to consider these items, because as Bill did refer to, some of these projects take a lot of steps to get to tendering, and the earlier we can get to tendering in the new year is there's only so many contractors out there with the resources available, and if we can get our projects out earlier, one, we have people picking them up and we get the better price. So upfronting this in the process is really helpful. So I just wanted to say thanks, Bill, for all of the work you put into this, and thank you all for considering the project list put forward.
I would love to bring it to you sooner. For example, we've got roofing site visits on Thursday. If we could get our roofing prices in before Christmas, we're ahead of CNL and the Catholic Board and the hospitals who were all fighting for those resources. And it gives the contractor an assured job, so they know what they're doing for July and August. So having the ability to lock up those contractors early is so important. We've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last 7 or 8 years by doing that. So that's
Yeah.
We had one of these projects, the Rockwood HVAC renovations for the center core of the building. It's not an approved project, but the tender's going out. We don't have, if I'm told at the end of this that we're not doing that work, we will withdraw the tender. But at least we're trying to have as much work on the shelf ready to go as we can. Especially the other thing too is if there are opportunities for support through a different channel, or if the ministry announces a pot of money, having shovel-ready projects is so important to put in front of the decision makers. So we're working towards that every year to try and get things, to get a little further ahead of the game.
Hats off to you and your team. Just doing every regular day stuff, and then you're just adding a small, like $10 million, projects on top of that, right? So, but with this report comes a recommendation. So I'll just read that off. That the Renfrew County District School Board approved the 2022-2023 capital priorities as presented in the amount of $10,860,400. So I moved this recommendation and just need a seconder. Thank you, Mike. All in favor? Thank you, and that's passed. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think this was really
My pleasure. Yeah.
Central Public School.
Yes, well, we're getting there. Slow progress.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
Yep. That's all that I have on the agenda. Anybody have anything else? No?
Oh.
All right. So I require a mover and a seconder to adjourn the committee of the whole. Thanks, David. Thanks, Kim. All in favor? Thank you, everybody. Make our first meeting pretty good.
Yes.
So we'll take about a 15-minute break and try and get underway with our board at 4, if that's okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. So we are hosting the board meeting for November the 29th, which is hard to believe already. And a welcome to each one of you. I would like to start, please, with a territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which our school and district buildings are situated is the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples on the land on which we gather today. And I would like to ask Vice Chair Leo Boland to do the invocation, please.
May we who are assembled here have a true understanding of the duties that are placed in our hands. We seek to have the wisdom to honor our obligations to the good of the residents of Renfrew County, to the parents, teachers, electors, and especially the students. May those who teach be ever inspired by goodness, and may the wisdom and knowledge which they impart to our students ever serve as a beacon to lighten their way. As trustees and administrators, we will work together with integrity, perseverance, and respect to the fulfillment of the trust bestowed upon us.
Thank you, Trustee Boland. We do have regrets today from Trustee Kaiser and Trustee Primo. And I believe we're missing a superintendent today as well.
We do, Mr. Panetta.
Yes, so regrets from her as well, I'm sure. So sorry to have missed her. I require a motion to approve the agenda of today's meeting. Require a mover and a seconder, Trustee Morris and Trustee Gannett. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of this agenda? Thank you very much. And as always, we do ask for conflict of interest on any agenda items we have, and if there's any concerns on anybody's part for as conflict of interest on this agenda, you can declare so now. I still not seeing any conflict of interest at this point. The minutes were distributed. Not sure just what the date was, but they were distributed. And I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of the November 15th meeting. Thank you, Trustee Dobson and Trustee Doherty. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes of November 15th. Thank you very much. Okay, and I think with that, we'll move right into our presentation. We have some guests here, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Kuzno to introduce them for us.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. As you all know, Kristen is responsible for the FSL portfolio, but given her absence, I've volunteered to present this wonderful team. Alors, ça me fait grand plaisir de présenter Mélanie, Catherine et Shelley. Just want to provide a little bit of context as to why Melanie and Catherine this afternoon. Since June 2020, we have, as a district, have had a formal partnership with ACP, which stands for l'Association Canadienne des Professionnels de l'Immersion. And that partnership was to augment our ability to support staff. And part of it was from a professional development to creating strong opportunities for networking opportunities, including an annual scholarship to Francophonia, l'Université Francophonia, which runs over the summer in Nice, France. And then COVID hit. So Francophonia stopped their operations for a couple of years, but then resumed just this past summer. So in my capacity at the time, I managed to negotiate. We have one scholarship guaranteed in the agreement, but given that we had been on pause, I managed to negotiate with ACP that we would receive 2 scholarships, and we were able to send an elementary and a secondary administrator to Francophonia. I had always heard great things about Francophonia. It's an opportunity where cultures intersect because they bring people from around the world, from French-speaking areas, provide some professional development, some cultural opportunities. So I have never myself attended, but I've heard great things, and I know that from chatting with our participants upon their return, I know that they've enjoyed the opportunity. So that's essentially how we landed on bringing them in to talk about their experience, but also in the last few years, what opportunities has been made available to them under the great leadership of Shelley Gagné. So over to you, Shelley.
Thank you. And so I am really excited to have this dynamic duo here with us today, Melanie and Catherine. Melanie teaches at Walter Zaddo in our prior, and Catherine is at Valor Secondary. So I'm going to just set the tone, set the stage for them, and then turn it over to them because they've got a wealth of experience and opportunities that they'd like to share with you. So part of our French as a second language support is to focus on building capacity and provide professional learning to encourage and support innovation and creativity, to support recruitment and retention, and to create an equitable approach for all students. So as Ronald mentioned, and I think you hear a lot about Francophonia, and that'll be like the highlight and the celebration component of it all, but a lot of opportunities that are provided for our FSL staff. And through the partnership with ACP, we feel really excited about the amount of opportunities that we can provide. I think last year alone, there was close to 20 different professional learning sessions available from K to 12. And we continue to get feedback and work with that partnership to provide additional support and learning for our educators. So they're going to share today a little bit about that partnership with ACP, some of the things, the takeaways that they've learned about and have implemented into their classroom programs and opportunities for students. And then the highlight part of sharing about their trip to France in the summer. So I'll turn it over to you both. Okay.
Okay, so I also had the opportunity to go to the ACP conference at the beginning of the month. And there was lots of opportunity for collaboration because on Thursday evening, there was a social at the hotel and where teachers from all across Canada. I even met some teachers in the elevator. So we got to kind of mingle and talk and what's it like in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So that was really nice. And we had an hour and a half for lunch. So again, we got to talk and share, we like to talk, teachers. Lots of opportunity for growth and creativity. I love teaching French through the arts. So I was really excited that they had this workshop, Bouger, Danser, which is incorporating French music from around the world and different genres. And we got right into it and we had to participate as teachers, which is really fun. And then come to the school and have ready-made activities, vocabulary sheets. I've already started using it. I also went to another workshop where we looked at appreciation of the Indigenous arts. So looking at artwork or cinematography by Indigenous peoples and videos and music and how in French we could talk about it. J'aime, j'apprécie, quel est le thème, like how we can incorporate the two. So there's lots of creativity there and not overwhelming, right? Like it was right away, we can bring it into the classroom. And then about a week later, we had access to all the PowerPoints. The other thing about ACP is all our teachers in the board have access to the websites, and on a monthly basis, they have like teacher sharing resources, virtual workshops. And I don't know that all the teachers know this. I was just at Delphi yesterday and I talked to some teachers and said, oh, it's really good. You should go on the ACP sites. Oh, really? Do I have a membership? We all do. So I think that's something we need to promote to the teachers because it's a really good website.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the diversity library. So just to give a little bit of context, I was getting pretty concerned teaching French that all of these sets of books that we had in our book room were all written by white men in the 2020s. So I love Le Petit Prince, I love Zone, I love Molière. These are great classic books that are still worth teaching. However, they can't be the only thing that we teach. So that had been kind of something I was talking to some colleagues about. And then I found out about the collective catalog of FSL books for diversity. Some of our literacy coaches were involved in that as well. And the effort is for French second language teachers to go and read a whole bunch of books that are written by a wide diversity of people, Indigenous authors, women, people of color, all sorts of folks, and kind of make recommendations to each other about what may be appropriate for different levels, both in terms of different ages, but also in terms of linguistic levels. We've got core, we've got immersion. There are different things that different groups of students can do. So having that resource, and it's not just people in our board, it's other places in Ontario as well. And our literacy coaches have been working on building a lending library. And at Valor, we were fortunate enough to put a little bit of money into buying some class sets of some books. So these are ones that I've now taught at Valor, and I can lend them out to other people as well. They are fantastic books. Shini is written by an Innu woman from Quebec, and it ties in really well with stuff that we're doing in history classes as well. So that interdisciplinary stuff is really strong. Je m'appelle Miriam is a very accessible linguistically book that follows the story of an Iranian immigrant who moves to France when she's about 6 years old. And the reaction from the students was so powerful because they were making so many connections and they were just really, really reflecting on the books themselves and getting everything that you would expect students to get out of literature, but also thinking about like, hey, how come we haven't been hearing these stories before? And those kinds of questions. So I think if we click on just the student voice part, I won't read you a whole bunch, but I think it was Jordan Sloan from the board office. Oh, it's not clicking, no, but that's okay. She put up there a bunch of testimonials that I had collected from my students. They're all written in French, but if you go there, you'll see that the kids are making really insightful connections about like why this is important, why we need more diversity in what we do, the content of what we're reading. So I think this is a really worthwhile initiative. It ties in well with our 6 C's. You know, what does citizenship mean beyond Renfrew County, right? In a very global context. How do we think critically about these big issues? How do we communicate about them? And all those C's. This was really powerful, and I was so glad that I had that support from our literacy coaches and from colleagues and from administrators to go ahead with that.
Yeah, and you're already loaning me one.
Yeah.
I'm on board already.
It's perfect.
After the francophone, yeah. So our experience started right away. We had never met in person. We met at the train station to board the bus to the airplane, to Montreal, to take the airplane. Right away, we're like, anyway, we were talking, and then we had the whole university experience, right? Because we were staying in a dorm in France, which was a little different than what we were used to. And then in the morning, walking to the campus for 8 o'clock, pull to cafe, and then meet and greet, and then to our classes we go. So that was really nice. And then, so we usually went till 1:30, like 8 till 1:30, and then had a little break. We'd go for a hike. Well, people went to eat. We'd like, let's grab a baguette and then go for a hike. And then we'd meet again for excursions. And a lot of the time in the excursions, they'd put us into group with different groups. And we're talking people from Romania, Austria, Italy, Greece, like all over the world.
Turkey, Iran,
Yeah, and we had two,
Philippines.
yeah, and then we still had 2 from Saskatchewan as
Yeah,
well.
they're
So
the
we
only
had other Canadians. But they give us little assignments as we walked in excursions, like what's the ideal school? How many hours a week do you teach French? That was interesting too, because some schools, they have French just 1 hour a week. Some it's like us every day. So it was like, we always had little fun assignments like that. So that was really fun. Excursions, sometimes we'd take the train or a ferry. So that was our day. And one evening, that's a top picture, I think. We had kind of like a talent show where each nation had to go up and present, and we did like a song with
It was
okay.
great. Yeah. And so there were a lot of things we learned in our classes that we could bring right back and also share with colleagues. So like we did one about integrating more philosophical questioning and critical thinking into our classroom. There was one about drama that you did. I did one that was a little more nuts and bolts of linguistic, like language acquisition. So it gave me some tools to come back to my students with to help them build like personalized dictionaries and just different strategies that I could use with them. You wanted to talk about taking risks, right?
Right. So that's that picture that looks like, all right, I started a fight. No. Okay. So we're often asking our students, you know, take a chance, take a risk, guess, get up there, do improv, sing, and like it's kind of easy for us. But when we have to present and participate in front of our colleagues or our peers, we really get to know what it feels like for them. So having been there for a week, we really got to try these activities. We really got to participate instead of just like reading about it and stuff like that. So that activity, I took a drama course for a couple of days, and that activity, we had to create a scene, take a picture, put it on our little social media site we had with our group, and then somebody else would pick it up and do what happened before that picture. And so we had fun things like that, but it really got us to know what it feels like to be on the spot and take risks. And then when we're asking our students to take risks, like we need to be willing to do that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Had you wanted to talk about equity? And
All right.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so I've been teaching in this board for between 10 and 20 years. And I've really seen the change, especially in the French immersion. So when I started in French immersion, teaching the 5, 6, 7, 8, the grade 4 teacher would usually come to see me in the spring and say, this kid would be good for French immersion. I don't know about this kid. They struggle with this and that. And so it was streaming a little bit, right? So, I mean, we've gone away from that years ago where everybody's included. Everybody is encouraged that wants to take French immersion, right? And especially now we have like kindergarten, we have lots of different grades. So it really solidified that, talking to other nations and talking to other schools around the world and how how they teach French. And of course, in lots of places, like they're speaking 2, 3, another language at home, right? And everybody does, right? Everybody's included in, and it's for everyone. So really being able to collaborate with other teachers, and how are we able to support our students, and how are we able to help the parents that often say to me, I can help my child at home, and things like that, and encouraging teachers to continue to go to workshops, to help each other, to collaborate, because we have lots of ideas, but sometimes we need fresh ideas. And I think we need to continue to think about how we can support our teachers if we're saying everybody's welcome, right? Because just like in any classroom, we have students from all different levels, and how can we help them when we do have students with IEPs and French immersion. We do have students that may need a little bit of extra support. So keeping that in mind.
Mhm. And I'll just speak a little bit about like global competencies and perspectives. Us being in France was just really powerful for us to be working with a lot of colleagues where for a lot of us, French was our second, third, fourth language for some of our colleagues. And yet the language that we all had in common was French, and that was the environment we were immersed in. So one of our professors even made the case that a francophone is anyone who is getting by in French, using French, which is very different than we somehow often understand it in Canada, where there's this kind of duality of Anglophone and Francophone. And if you weren't born into a Francophone family, you're not a Francophone. And in Europe and in a lot of places in the world, it's much more like, well, what are your competences? What can you do with that language? And if you can use French, you are a Francophone. And I thought that was a very empowering sort of perspective for us as professionals. A lot of the French teachers in our board are not des francophones, but we can be francophones, right? If we're using it and always trying to improve it. And it's a powerful message also for our students, right? That they are and they can be francophone, right? And wherever they are along that journey, if they're using it and they're trying and they're improving, that's really cool. They're a francophone as well, perhaps. So it's a discussion I even had with my students coming back, like, do you consider yourself des francophones? What's going on here? And why do we maybe understand that differently in different places? And, you know, what are the cultural and historical reasons why? And it was really, really interesting. So I'm just going to mention leadership, recruitment, retention. Melanie's already mentioned how important it is that like we're connecting with other educators. But I think it's powerful too to see these kinds of opportunities, to see that the RCDSB is investing in its teachers, in its programs, in providing really good resources to our educators and to our students, because that's also going to help with recruitment and retention. And the reality is there are things like market share, there are things like making sure that we have the person power to support these strong programs. And if we can point to examples like these and say, yes, you know, if you are an educator who cares about providing good French language opportunities to students, Renfrew County is a place for you. This is a place where you can flourish, whether you're a beginner teacher, whether you're a veteran, whether French is your first language or your fourth language. Like if you're willing to do this, we want to support you and we want us all to work together towards really great programming here. And that can be powerful for bringing people in and for keeping them. So, few questions?
Dynamic duo, right? Aren't they exciting? Wouldn't you want to be a student in their class? I know the passion that they have is phenomenal, and to have these experiences really provides such an opportunity for the students in their programs, and they could make such an impact on our students and our board. So thank you for sharing all of the learning, the opportunities that you've been able to take part of within our board, and we're happy to take some questions if anybody has any.
Hey, do we have any questions? Yes, Trustee Morris.
Thank you very much. It's not really a question, but I'm sold. Nobody buy a car or something. Oh my gosh. Where do we find people like this? This is great. You make sure that, yeah, in terms of keeping, you know, our experienced teachers such as these 2 stars, put chains on them.
I think we should just take them on the road to recruit new teachers like this they've just shared.
I like that definition of what's a francophone. You know, it really is inclusivity in a different sphere. And It's powerful. It really is. We tend to think as if we're like a horse with blinders on, you know. That, no, it's far more than if you were, you know, born, a Frank bull, whatever. So I guess my mother grew up in Durham, in Montreal, and was fluent bilingual. Even Francophone in that sense, even though she came from a pure English background. Then unfortunately didn't speak any French because of my father, you know, in the house at all. And and I really suffered for it. But I love the definition. It really is strong. And it doesn't really matter that much where you are on that continuum. If you want to be on that continuum and you're moving forward, well, I'm sure the kids in your class do. So, thank you so.
And I think it's also celebrating Franco-Ontarian, like being a Franco-Ontarian, like. It's to that. Right?
I think we have trustee Boland and we'll do trustee Morris.
Yeah, it sounds like an awesome trip and conference to go to, and certainly your students are benefiting from that. So how do we get other teachers to benefit from your experience over there?
Collaborating, opportunities for that. And with Francophonia, there are other programs that continue. Like they have a program where they will work with 5 students, or a program where they will train one of us and we can work here in Canada. So it doesn't have to end right there, but we like working with other teachers too.
Yeah, I think like right now I'm seeing just within my school, when we have the opportunities to chat and collaborate informally, like we're sharing ideas. And so a lot of what I learned there, I'm bringing back there. You know, we used to have things like subject councils where we might have a little more time and space to share, you know, with teachers from other schools as well. So I think there are probably opportunities too that we could as a board carve out. But I'm not too sure about that. But yeah, as Melanie said, it's beyond just the conference too, like right down to, you know, I've added Francophonia to my Facebook feed. So every day I see some cool posts and ideas and resource sharing, and there are other ways too that people share resources. So even though I'm not there anymore, I'm still seeing people from Norway and from Belgium and from the Philippines sharing ideas about what's working in their language classes, specifically in French. So that's pretty cool.
And even having the opportunity to share. Yesterday I was at ADHS doing the DELF, and during lunchtime, Stephanie McCullough from RCIS, who teaches 7-8, her and I were like, blah, 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 blah. And now we're starting pen pals this week with our classes. So even anytime you allow teachers that teach the same grade levels to meet, because sometimes you feel like an island, like I'm the only one teaching 7 and 8 French immersion. And I was for a while at ADHS by myself, but you know what I mean? So anytime we have an opportunity to put together, we're like, try this resource. Did you try this? Yeah. So having that opportunity where we can be together.
And just to add on to that, I think, you know, during the pandemic, we did the best we could with what we had in front of us. So a lot of it was virtual, and, you know, it was great to connect people, but it wasn't the same as that in-person conversation. So now that we've moved away and back into some in-person learning, our coaches, of course, they plan and deliver a lot of the programming and PD, but that doesn't mean that they're the only knowledge in the room. So we look to bring everybody collectively together and share. So we're hoping that now that we're back in person, that we can have people like Melanie and Catherine to take the lead and demonstrate that leadership. It's not just about the coaches, it's about like the knowledge and experiences in the room. So let's provide that opportunity for them.
Trustee Morris?
Susan,
Sorry.
if I can just add, so because the question was, how can we ensure that other teachers get that opportunity? It's actually part of our agreement with ECP is provided that Francophonia runs and that ECP is the agent for those scholarships in Canada. At least one will be directed to our district.
Excellent. So thank you for that. And trustee Gannett, I'm sorry,
That's fine.
it's exchanged
Pretty
you
good
with
shot.
trustee Morris.
Just as far as the FSL goes, I really like the fact that I would be on board to sort of re-energize or reignite subject councils, particularly when it comes to like FSL. You know, like I'm just what ifs. You know, you have a county PD day, you go for the morning with whatever you do in PD, and the afternoon, maybe a subject council or the FSL would get together as a group. Just tossing that out there. I really think there's value in that to nurture that. My second part is a question, and that is, when it comes to equity and everybody having the opportunity to take FSL, I'm out of the system for 5 years, but I do hear things, and once in a while I'll hear, it's great to have everybody have that opportunity. However, how much is truly in place for those students who really aren't, quote, let's say language oriented, that struggle? And I know you said we couldn't guess your age because you said 10 to 20 years you've been working. So I like that comment, but I'm just wondering, have you seen support stay the same, grow? Because obviously we're going to have more people taking FSL. And I'm just wondering about, in your words, the supports. To what varying degrees are they? I really don't know.
I think a lot of it is on us. And if we need additional support, we'll contact the coaches. But I think a lot of it is on us.
Be really creative, and that would be the example.
Creative, and I feel like, I mean, we reach out to teachers are always helping teachers, and we have our coaches, but we're usually alone in our class. And I've had parents ask, like, what about tutors? And I've tried to reach out to parents of former students to see, but that would be nice to have access to say, hey, here are some tutors, or here, we don't often have spec ed support.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sorry. I think it's a learning, it's lots of learning and how to implement IEPs, because you're right, in the past it was a bit streamed, and you would have heard that years and years ago, and now it's equitable for all students. And so we're trying to ensure that support is given in French programs just as much as it is in English programs. And it's language based, right? So whatever the support is that a CERT can give, it's transferable in both languages. So we're trying to really enforce that and build that knowledge and capacity around that it is available. But sometimes you'll get that feedback that I don't speak French, I can't help them. But if, like I said, it's transferable in language. So it's just reinforcing that and believing that support will help regardless if it's in English for a portion of time, and then it'll translate into the French program as well.
But students still have IEPs where we can say, okay, we're good teaching practices like accommodations, or they have their SIA devices or additional time, like we still have.
And I would say, like, there are a lot of us that do have our spec ed qualifications who are very concerned about trying to serve everybody really well, all those students. But then, like, in practice, there are some times where I think the reality is in a French language classroom that students who need support of, let's say, an EA coming in or student success teachers working with them, those professionals don't necessarily have the ability to communicate in French. So, you know, they have the background in special education and they have great things to offer. They can help set up the technology and stuff. In a perfect world, you know, all the educational assistants and everyone would be bilingual, but that's not quite where we are right now. So I would say that sometimes as classroom teachers, we're stepping up a little bit more, but all teachers are, right? We're all working really, really hard to include everyone. So I don't know if it's unique to French, but.
Director Pafoni.
Through you, Madam Chair, our guests are very gracious with us this afternoon. We, as staff and as senior leadership, have some work to do in this area. And it's work we expected to do when we put in place a multi-year program 5 years ago at the elementary level. The good news, the comforting news, is that the complaints around the lack of support are coming. If this program of immersion was solely a streaming option, those complaints wouldn't be coming. Those students of a diversified background wouldn't be in what our guests, Catherine and Melanie, have described. But the fact that we are getting some complaints around more supports needed is the actual proof of the diversification and what I would call the democratization of a French immersion program that had historically been more of a streamer, more so for the elite than the non. And so that's a positive sign for us, but we do have more work to do. And that work as an organization is catching up culturally. Our organizational culture is beginning to look at all roles and responsibilities across a more fluidly bilingual kind of environment. And I think Madame Gagné hit it right on the spot. When you're a support teacher, it's not the language that's key, it's the strategy you're putting into place as an accommodation or modification, regardless of whether it's French, English, or Swahili. It's the strategy, not the language. And that's part of the organizational culture shift. And I'm so proud to listen to our staff say, all of us are stepping up. We're stepping up that way, I think, as an organization. And that's part of both the challenge and the opportunity we need to keep in mind and have in place to ensure that the language doesn't become the streamer that it was in the past, that it becomes more equitable, regardless of which program a student chooses. It's part of the reason at the elementary level 5 years ago that we stabilized what subjects would be taught in which language, so that we didn't have students bouncing from having 2 years of math and French, and then I've got Mr. Smith and I do math for a year in English, and then I've got Madame Monique and I'm doing math again in French. We stabilized what we would teach in English and in French. And now the decision-making in front of us at the secondary level is to establish what are those 7 to 10 courses for a certificate and extended or immersion are going to be in play that we can stabilize. It's not that you can't teach math and French. There's nothing against it. Entire countries do so, including where our guests went. It's that we have to make decisions to be able to resource those decisions properly and predict what we need in the future. That's part of the reason why what's coming to the Board of Trustees shortly at the secondary level around immersion is a stable set of courses. It's not that you can't teach any course in French, you can. We're going to stabilize that so we can staff to it, resource to it, and make sure that what's started in elementary is carried through into secondary for the experience of the student as ultimately our client. So I wanted to add that in because I'm really inspired by what I'm hearing. And I think it's the fruit of the decisions that the board made a number of years ago that aren't easy decisions, but also can't be everything to everyone. We've got to make them to set the best quality program we can in front of us. And the numbers alone of students choosing programs and enrollment to our previous reporting committees are, I think, bearing some of that fruit.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions around the table?
Just one
Yes.
comment.
Yeah.
I posed the question because I really wanted a healthy debate. I really do think the pendulum's moving in the right direction. That's my summary. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I don't think there's any question. We would all love to be in your class, and we thank you so much for what you do for students every single day, because they cannot help but love being in French class with you too. And I'm sure that your support to other teachers in the district too is so appreciated. What a great trip to France, but you brought back tons of stuff, so it's worth the investment. Go ahead, Pino.
Thank you. Catherine, Mélanie, nous vous remercions pour votre temps aujourd'hui, vos efforts toujours concernant le perfectionnement professionnel de notre personnel en français langue seconde ou même français langue additionnelle, comme vous avez dit. C'est important pour nos élèves, nos étudiants, pour nos écoles, dans notre conseil scolaire. Merci beaucoup.
Appreciate you coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Yeah, for instance,
That definition.
that word. In space. Awesome. Thank you again so much. That's the. I'll just go back to it. Okay, that was a wonderful presentation. It certainly gives us lots of things to think about, right? And how well we have, how far we've come along with FSL in our schools. So thank you for that. We'll go ahead with the committees of the reports to the board, and I believe we have 2 tonight, only 2. And committee of the whole open and closed session reports, and I would call on Vice Chair Boland to give those.
Thank you. The Committee of the Whole of the Renfrew County District School Board met on November 29th, 2022, and discussed the following items in open session. The Audit Committee meeting open session report, November 23rd, 2022, including draft consolidated financial statements, the accumulated surplus appropriation transfer report, and the capital priorities 2022-2023. And following this, we have some recommendations that were made. The Audit Committee meeting open session report, November 23rd, 2022, including draft consolidated financial statements. Number 1, 2022 to 23 regional internal audit update that the Renfrew County District School Board Audit Committee receives for information. The November 23rd, 2022 REAT update. Number 2, 2022 to 23 internal audit charter that the Renfrew County District School Board Audit Committee approved the 2022-23 regional internal audit team charter. Number 3, draft audited financial statements for the year ended August 31st, 2022, that the Renfrew County District School Board adopted draft 2021-22 financial statements as audited and reported upon by Welch LLP at their November 29th, 2022 board meeting, subject to board approval of the internally restricted accumulated surplus transfers. And number 4, annual reports to the board from the Audit Committee, that the Audit Committee approved the annual report to the Board of Trustees for the year ended August 31st, 2022, and the annual report to the Board of Trustees and forwarded to the Ministry of Education for the year ended August 31st, 2022, and that both reports be adopted by the Renfrew County District School Board at the November 29th, 2022 board meeting. Also, capital priorities 2022-2023, that the Renfrew County District School Board approved the 2022-2023 capital priorities as presented in the amount of $10,860,400. I move that the board adopts this report.
I won't ask you to repeat that.
Yeah.
I just go ditto.
Thank you for that. Do I have a seconder to adopt this report? Trustee Morris, any discussion or questions? I know we just discussed all this earlier today, so it's probably pretty clear and have a good idea of what's involved. Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting this report? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We have a closed session report as well.
It's shorter.
This is shorter. Yes, okay, thank you.
The Committee of the Whole of the Renfrew County District School Board met on November 23rd, 2022, and discussed the following items in closed session. QP collective bargaining, Audit Committee meeting closed session report of November 23rd, 2022, including the financial statements. No recommendations were made. I move that the board receives this report.
Do I have a seconder for this to receive this report? Trustee Gannett? Any discussion or questions on this one? All those in favor of receiving this report? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, and I believe we have potentially a CEAC committee report, do we, Trustee Morris?
I wasn't around.
Oh, yeah, you were on someplace warm. Trustee Morris, do you have a report for us?
Actually, he was at his cottage
Oh, that's true.
in isolation.
Oh, that's true. So maybe it wasn't so warm.
Anyway, the Special Education Advisory Committee met November 16th, 2022, day after our inaugural meeting. And we had a really interesting report from the RCDSB Literacy Intervention Support teachers. Literacy is important for all students, really is. Students who have special needs, they are just as much in need of, sound literacy education as so-called neurotypical, students. And I was really impressed by what they don't ask me to remember, too much, but because viewed through the fog of online and COVID sort of eyes. But this board, there's a line that I've heard many times. We punch above our weight when it comes to, spec ed. And this is just another example of, excellence in our staff, dynamism, and just really trying to meet the needs of our students. And we just had a presentation in French immersion where we saw exactly the same kind of thing. After their report, we had we discussed staff updates. There was a report from the board I gave, and association reports, and no recommendations were made in the adoption of this report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Morris. So trustee has moved the receipt of this report. Do I have a seconder for the receipt of that report? Thank you, Trustee Jobson. Any discussion or questions on this report? All those in favor of receipt of this report? And that is carried. Thank you very much. On to the director's update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the fall season continues to move along quickly and the days become shorter and shorter over the coming months, I'd like to provide a few rays of sunlight for all of us through the activities and events, initiatives, and projects across the system. First and foremost, the 8 site visits of the Rethink at Secondary initiative are now fully taken place. With the start of those consultations with adult and continuing education staff on September 29th here at the board office, through to the Renfrew Collegiate Institute session on Friday, November 25th, just last Friday. The consultative sessions have been tremendously insightful and genuinely pragmatic in nature. As previously mentioned, the feedback gathered will inform the recommendations brought forth to the Board of Trustees later this fall or early this winter for consideration. Really a wonderful collaboration with staff. Again, very genuine comments that felt real and felt very practical, very thoughtful on their part, and was very thankful, grateful, and impressed that our staff truly came prepared to talk about secondary schools, envisioning out what they look like and what they could look like into the future. So it was very, very wonderful initiative. The initiative regarding the review of secondary schools will also capture input from a number of stakeholder groups, including the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, the Parent Involvement Committee, Special Education Advisory Committee, and the Student Senate at their fall meetings, as well as through a thought exchange platform with an overarching prompt related to public education at the secondary level to take place over the next few weeks. So this is really 2 thought exchange, one for our students that are being led again, Ava and Taylor. Thank you, Ava, for your leadership in that. Will help us promote that with our students. The prompt that Taylor and Ava are working on through Superintendent Riddell is being finalized and likely to be out for a period of about the beginning of December to the middle of December. The prompt for our public, our parents and guardians and the broader public, is also currently being worked on. It's a separate exchange so that we can separate out student perspectives here from that of the broader public. And we'll also be going out in that approximately early December to middle of December timeframe. For the Board of Trustees, we will send out a notice. We'll ask for your help in promoting in any way, passing along. Hannah, through our communications, will prepare some social media just to sort of set the stage for the prompt and to encourage our public to give their perspective on what they would like to see in the secondary schools for their children or their community and society more broadly. So very excited to have that other piece of information that will add to what we've collected to date. The district also continues as a final item in the updates here to follow the advice provided by the Chief Medical Officer of Health as outlined in the guidelines for the 2022-2023 health and safety measures in schools that include optional masking, as well as other elements of good hand hygiene, and most importantly, staying home when you are unwell or ill in any context. Other items for the Board of Trustees: Algonquin College Pembroke campus had its 10th anniversary on the 28th of October. It was an authentic, inspirational event that showcased testimonials of students, college students many from our district, through their post-secondary pathways in pursuit of their passions. The district is grateful for and looks forward to the continued constructive partnerships with AC Pembroke campus into the future, including our dual credits program, but many, many others. Central Public School on Thursday, November the 10th, celebrated the grand opening of its new playground, a wonderful refresh of the premises for the students, the staff, and of course, the school community. And last but certainly not least, as is the case each and every school year across the system, Remembrance Day ceremonies were held on Friday, November 11th. It was inspiring to see the array of meaningful activities that held at both elementary and secondary schools, both in person and or online, including an interactive, thoughtful ceremony on site for elementary students at Valor K-12 school that day. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions or comments on Director Buffoni's report? Yeah, Central Public School was really fun that day. It was a gorgeous day, and I'm sure you saw social media around children just so excited about being there. So that was a wonderful community support, and huge thank you to the Rotary Club of Renfrew for all their not only money but their manpower support. It was pretty impressive. And normally I do have a chair's report, but I just don't have one this month, to be honest. Too much else going on, and I'm going to be talking quite a bit around OPSBA along with Trustee Doherty. So I thought, we'll just wait for another day for that. So I'm sure you're not too upset about that. And a student trustees report. I believe we do have Ava on board with us. I'm sorry that Taylor doesn't appear to be with us today, but Ava, are you there? Would you like to do your report?
Yes, I am. And I'll be reading Taylor's part as well, just because she's on a school trip right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so in late October, we had FGM. It was held at the Marriott in downtown Toronto, and it was a very busy and eventful weekend. Taylor spent a lot of time running sessions, photographing the conference, and working with tech, as well as running a few sessions on her own. She did, however, have the opportunity to listen in on some key speakers and have some one-on-one conversations with those guests. I was able to run a public board council breakout session for the Southern region. During this time, we focused on finding common ground between all the Southern boards and deciding on a few main goals for the year that would benefit all students. I also had the opportunity to join the Equity and Inclusion Working Group, which I am over the moon to be part of. In this group, we discussed how important it is to support survivors of sexual assault and what our boards should be doing in these situations. On top of that, we also did a lot of networking with different student trustees. Over that weekend, we learned a lot of valuable lessons that will not only be carried on with us to future conferences, but also some skills that we could take back to Senate and school. Although it was a busy weekend for us, I'm very thankful we had the chance to attend, and we're both looking forward to the BCCs. On November 10th, we had our second Senate meeting. It was held online, but nonetheless was very productive. Beginning now, Taylor and I both believe it's important to start our meetings with a land acknowledgement. So as a group, and with the help of Amy Charbonneau, we had a very meaningful conversation about what a land acknowledgement is, what it is compared to a territorial acknowledgement, and ways we could take action on what we are saying. As a group, we believe it is important to not only state an acknowledgement, but understand the words we are saying to the fullest. We learned that we not only need to listen, but we also need to understand it's not just dialogue, it's an act of reconciliation. On November 12th, Taylor had an online executive council meeting. At the meeting, they debriefed completely from FGM, as well as a complete mandatory equity training. Taylor learned many skills, but some memorable topics include finding ways to include more diverse voice as student trustees, how to imply an inclusion lens on her work, and she also included there that she realizes that when she needs to make decisions, she not only needs to look at who is it intended for, but also who is benefited by that decision. And finally, on November 14th, it was our first equity meeting led by Alex Wright, who is our student Senate representative for the group. The short meeting included updates from each school's equity minister, planning on how we can make school more inclusive for everyone around the holidays, as well as a very meaningful conversation on bullying and how online social platforms play a huge role in this. Our biggest takeaway from that meeting was for everyone to have a meeting with their principal to discuss the issue, and hopefully an anti-bullying assembly can be arranged sometime in the near future to refresh everyone's minds about the effects and consequences, as well as the ways bullying can be perpetrated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the student, about Ava's reports, Ava and Taylor? Two quick questions for you, Ava. FGM. I'm just looking for the acronym, what it means.
Fall general meeting.
Yeah, full general meeting.
Fall general meeting. And BCCs.
I'm actually,
I
I'm
don't
not
know either.
sure.
Okay. BCCs, we could make something up maybe.
Yeah,
Stay
sorry about
tuned.
that. I will find out and I'll let you know next time.
Okay, that's no worries. I know that Taylor wrote that part, so it's kind of hard to put you on the spot. I'm very impressed with the work that your equity group is doing. Your student equity group within your student senate. It sounds like you're like way ahead of the rest of us, perhaps. In fact, so congratulations. We look forward to hearing more about that. But it sounds like you've really got some good thoughts and good ideas there. So thank you for sharing that, Ava. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the Ontario Public School Board Association and Trustee Doherty. Just to give you a little context, we did have a board meeting on the weekend. Trustee Doherty as a new trustee, but also the new OPSBA member or director for our board. And she did join virtually. And so that's always a little bit more challenging. And we headed in this massive boardroom that was like, anyway, I'm sure you couldn't see anybody's face because it was very
hard to tell who was talking.
I'm sure, well, it was actually being inside the room, so I can only imagine. Anyway, let me turn it over to you to provide what you can for us.
Okay, well, there was no sound for the first part, so I may have missed some stuff. And then my internet went, so I got the in between. The one thing was they did a study on the powers and duties of school boards for health and well-being of students and employees. And I think the focus was mostly on masking, but a little bit on vaccines and that kind of stuff. And it was done by, lawyer Anthony Brown. If anyone wants a copy of this, let me know. It's quite lengthy, but so I think as I get to the conclusion for it. So they looked at students and they looked at staff as two separate things. As I find the conclusion. For students, after they looked at all the different regulations and the different legal stuff, and it wasn't, there was a little thing that this isn't like a binding thing. This is just looking at the laws around it and what would likely happen. If the board was to impose masking on students without a health order or emergency direction, they believe it would run the risk of being struck down by courts. So just working with waiting until there's like an emergency order or that kind of thing until we can force masks was kind of what the report said, but it doesn't mean that it's binding. It's just kind of what they felt based on the law and case law. And for staff, it was kind of the similar thing. With regard to workplace safety, there could be some mandated measures with vaccines, but a mask policy without provincial or emergency orders would probably suffer the same fate in courts. But there's a lot of information in here, so if anyone wants a copy of that, it is available. And then I don't know if you had
No,
anything else with regards to that, like
not really. I mean, Tony Brown is a lawyer we've worked with before, and I think his scope, as I understood it too, was just to look at what's the case law and what are their parameters around the ability for a board to actually require students or employees to wear a mask. And we know that's been in the news lately anyway. I think you're all aware that Carlton has gone through that, and I believe another board too. So this just basically said, you can do it, yes, but it's not like they're going to stand up in court. So, it's just trying to put some parameters.
Just the likelihood of what would happen if it was
Yes,
brought to court kind of.
yeah, exactly.
He definitely goes into depth a lot more than.
Yes, he did.
Than I did. So,
And we won't even attempt that.
no. So I will pass out the next. Pass it down. It's a study that, and I'm not sure who it was that presented.
This was Nick Nanos. Okay.
And just kind of an interesting study as well. I'll just wait till it gets across there. Just people's views on public education. There's a few different questions in there that I thought was interesting listening to, but.
Can I just get a little bit of context to it, Kim, if that's okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
This study was requested by OPSBA in advance of our advocacy day with the MPPs, which we held yesterday. And so it was to really do a survey, and we've done it before. A couple of years ago, we did one previously. And so it was just to kind of revisit some of those things to get the public view. So these were questions that were done as a survey. I believe it was probably early November with over 2,000 respondents. And these were kind of the key pieces that came forward. So carry on, Kim.
So I think the last study was 2019. And
I think it was, yeah.
they did one, it says October 2022.
Okay, so it was October, not November. Yeah.
Across Ontario. They found just some interesting numbers, but 9 and 10 Ontario residents agree somewhat. So agree or somewhat agree. Spending on public education is an investment in the future. It was a slight decline from 2019, but still very high. There was some views on how funding for education should be set. I'll just kind of skip ahead to some interesting things that I found. I don't know. Just where they felt the spending should be. It was maintenance and repair was one of the top ones, special education programs, and mental health is the top 3 spots. There was a little bit of talk of the private education system and people opposing or supporting Ontario funding that, tax dollars funding that. And I think he did break it down to that even though people opposing it went down, it was a lot of the younger ages. I can't remember what the age group he said it was.
He said under 30.
Yeah.
Are willing to think about using private schools.
And he did explain too that happens a lot. Kind of before people have children or before you're going to see that a little bit more too. So a lot still oppose it, but it did go down quite a bit from 2019. Important education priorities, computer coding, science, technology, engineering, math. 9 and 10, it was 9 and 10 that gave these as the most important. Ensure schools are accessible for all individuals, and mental health again.
There was a job done by Ontario Public Education System on Indigenous reconciliation. It was not as positive as some of the other ones, but Ontarians, we were split on it. Very good job, average job, and then 25% said a very poor job. But he did have an open question for what people could do. There was no choices. People kind of filled in, from what I understand, what there is. So the acknowledge and teach the truth of what happened to Indigenous peoples, add to the curriculum. No idea, I don't know. And have Indigenous people talk about their culture, more Indigenous teachers and activities. So I just thought that piece was interesting, but I'm not sure where the electing or appointing school board trustees came from. He kind of explained it, but I wasn't.
Yeah, I think the question was around should school board trustees be elected or appointed? Should be elected, democratically elected or appointed by government.
Okay, I wasn't
That's
sure
the
like if
question.
that was something that had been discussed.
Yeah, I think so. They said 4 times. So 65% is that said elected versus
Yes.
appointed?
Yeah. And again, he said it was within the lower or the younger ages that thought appointed,
yeah.
And there was a separation to it with cities and Northern Ontario. And that was it. If you have questions, I can try.
I'll just add a couple of
Yes.
things if you're okay with that, Kim. So Kathy Abraham, who's the president of OPSBA, did do a media release yesterday morning. And so there was an official media release that went out, but she did a press conference about it. And you can get the full report on the OPSBA website or on the nanos.co website. So you might want to look at some of the more of the detail around it. But it was good information to have in our back pocket with Advocacy Day too, particularly around the elected versus appointed, or some of those other things. So that may be helpful as well.
And during the questions too, I think he broke down some of the where the age groups were and where for when people asked different stuff. So I imagine in the full report you would be able to see that.
Yeah. Okay, so anything else?
That was it because my Wi-Fi went out.
Well, and it was, and I said to Kim, it was a bit of a shortened meeting as well, because normally we meet Friday night and Saturday most of the day. In fact, we only met from 1 until like 4 on Sunday. So it was kind of an abbreviated anyway. And then we did training for Advocacy Day. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what we were doing. So all day on yesterday, there were about 45 trustees and OPSBA staff that were meeting with a variety of MPPs at Queen's Park. And the OPSBA staff has set this up. So we had times and places and people we were meeting with. And I was fortunate enough to meet with 4 different MPPs. I met with Lucille Collard from the Ottawa Carleton area. And she was interesting because she had been a trustee on the French Catholic school board. So she had at least an idea of what trustees were all about, right? So that was good. I met with Joel Harden, also out of Ottawa. He's an NDP. Let me tell you what he did. Oh, sorry. She actually is also a critic for Attorney General and Francophone Affairs. Joel Harden is a critic for transportation out of Ottawa Centre. NDP, he was quite interested in talking about the convoy and some of the pieces around that, but that was good. I met with our own MPP, John Yakubuski, which was also very helpful, and as well with Merritt Stiles, who is the education critic for the NDP, but also running for the leadership of the NDP party. So that was very helpful, and she's certainly very on top of what's happening in education and is quite passionate about it. So that was really good. When we went and met with each, we had about half an hour with each MPP, we went in pairs, 2 or 3 of us maybe, but we actually focused in on 3 different topics. Student transportation. So, and we left them with this sheet that said, what's the issue? What are the recommendations? So very clearly what we were looking for. So student transportation, equity, diversity and inclusion, and capital and facilities. So we kind of focused in on those 3 priorities, had some conversations about them, tried to kind of get their insight into what they're thinking about some of this or what they know or don't know about it. So it was a very interesting day. And then we had a reception from 5:30 to 7 last night, where all of the MPPs were invited to come. So we actually had a really good turnout. It was quite amazing. There were a lot of people. And if you were having to watch question period yesterday morning, I'm sure you all were. It is such an exciting thing. We actually got to sit on question period as well. There is a portion of time in question period where they're invited to acknowledge visitors. And so it was inundated with acknowledgement of the Ontario Public School Board Association, of school board trustees and these trustees are from my riding and, blah, 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 blah. So it was really interesting. We got a lot of press that day, like a lot of attention. So I think that's really good news for education, public education in general. So if you want to go back and read the answers, there are lots of acknowledgements of OPSBA there. So it was a very good day. I suspect we'll do it again next year, but the amount of time it takes to organize it just blows me away. But it was really interesting. So quite enjoyable. So that's all I needed to add, I think, from an OPSBA perspective, which is probably might be more than you needed to know, but I think anytime we have a chance to speak with MPPs about public education, we absolutely need to do that. So it was very good. Thank you, Kim. Yes, Trustee Morse.
Just a comment, really. I found this NANOS report rather quite interesting, and especially the page support public tax dollar funding of private education system. And when you look at the people who oppose or somewhat oppose doing that, or in 2022, and then also back in 2019, which is not very long ago, and it dropped from 67% to 59%. That is a very precipitous drop in just 3 years. And we have a conservative government that is newly elected, increased the majority, ideologically driven. Makes me wonder, is something possibly going to come out of it? And because they're fearless when it comes to this is what we should do, and we're going to do it, and they just do it. Just keep your eyes open.
It's certainly something to
The other shoe, I
think
think,
about and watch for sure. And you would be interested in the whole study, I think.
once in a while, there's sort of a murmur of, let's have our tax dollars go to private education. So far, it's been, floodgates been kept firmly closed. But I don't know.
And that's one of the reasons for advocacy day, really. I mean, we really stress public education. And we do know that there are other provinces in this country that do have tax dollars go to both public and private. So yes, it's a concern.
And it really does, though, for those of us who believe in public education and public funded public education, it really incentivizes us to, do the best job we possibly can. And I think we're making great strides in that, but it's a constant fight.
Constant battle, yeah. No, for sure, we need to be telling the good news story of what we are doing, and yeah. I think one of the challenges we have right now with that is our EQAO results across the province, right? That's a bit of a challenge, as we know, but it is what it is. Okay, thank you, Kim, for that, and the next one will be easier, I guarantee it. So thank you for your patience and being online and all of those good things as well. Correspondence, you will have seen in your package a letter from the Durham District School Board You can read it at your leisure. They're just making sure that they're continue and increase funding for special incidents, incident portion. That's probably the same for every school board in Ontario, to be honest. But it's good to have that voice as well. And is there any other business? I do want to talk about dates for a minute, but is there anything else that we need to be putting on the table?
I just wanted to talk about an article that came out today.
Okay, why don't you do
Just brief-
that and then I'll do the information dates here.
I haven't made it a secret that I'm really a proponent of skilled trades. Something came out today that I read. It's actually officially came out 3 days ago, but we got it through, I believe, OPSBA, which goes to the directors. And I just read it today, and the caption, the title is Ontario expanding dual credit program, allowing students to earn college credits to do apprenticeship training in high schools. I mean, the government's putting forth 4.8 million to expand dual credits. I won't read the article because you all have it, but I found this very interesting. Approximately 1 in 5 job openings in Ontario are projected to be in skilled trades or related occupations. And the other interesting statistic is by 2026, 1 in 3 journeyman tradesmen today are over 55. So they're on their way out. So we're going to have a real crunch. And I mean, I know some tradesmen in this area that are making well in excess of 6 figures. And we're not talking about 100,000 plus education degree at university. So, I mean, it depends on the student and the parents, but I mean, I'm looking at this as really good news. It's coming down the pipes, and just thought I'd share that. You've all got it on your information. It came out, I believe, today. So just thought I'd share that. Thank you.
Great. Are you two getting the email from TJ Goots or with the list of you may not be getting those yet? Okay, we'll make sure you're added to that list, because TJ works for OPSBA, and what he does is he does a news release kind of review of the newspaper articles in Ontario that are related to education. And so then he sends us out a list every morning with the links. So you can kind of look at the headlines and say, yep, I want to read that, or I haven't got time today, or, you know, those kinds of things, because there's a lot of information in there. So I'll just make sure you get that. Okay, just a couple of quick things before we adjourn. I just want to remind our trustees, we do have a meeting on the 6th, which is next Tuesday, and we are going to have some more orientation because we know there's just so much to cover, and I know it's a challenge, but I think you know that. We are meeting from 10 until 12 in the morning, and then from 1 until probably 5 in the afternoon. So we will be doing orientation from 10 to 12 and 1 to 3, and then from 3 to 5, we'll be doing committees. So we'll provide lunch, obviously. Might let you run around the block for 30 seconds, I'm not sure. But hopefully, I think that I know that Shelley had sent out the dates and you said you were available. So really appreciate you being there for that. I know it's going to be a good day, and we'll look forward to hearing lots of great stuff on equity, I believe, and more financial stuff, Janice. I know, our very favorite. Important stuff, though. We can't do anything without budget, so that's important. Now, I think we also had at one point we had December the 13th as a meeting. Am I dreaming that, or is that correct? What we're proposing is that we not have a meeting on the 13th, but have one on the 20th instead, which is the following Tuesday. Is that going to cause anybody a whole lot of grief? We do some things we'd like to bring to the board for sort of some thinking time over the holidays, and we felt if we took out the 13th and do the 20th, that might be a better time frame. So it would be committee of the whole probably, and board, right, on the 20th. So starting at, what time do we start? 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock. So we'd be starting at 2 o'clock on the 20th. So 2 till 5 probably. Okay. So if you have the 13th on your agenda, you can remove that one and go Christmas shopping. Okay, is there anything else for the good of this meeting? Are we okay? If not, I will make a motion to adjourn, and who would like to second that motion? Trustee Morris, and all in favor of adjournment?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you next Tuesday.